Hey, can I get a Korean speaker?
I do.
Dude.
I can.
All right, let's use you, man. You can have a seat here. Show yourself how to use the microphone. Can you guys have a seat here? You be on the end, bro. Okay. Put your laptops away, y'all. Laptops away. And it's another nice day out. And a lot of you are thinking, I don't want to be here, because you'd rather be on the Hublong playing hacky sack or whatever you do on the Hublong. I have no idea. But you're here. So we're in. All right, man. So listen, can you just say your name, if you would.
My name is Wang Yang, or you could call me Sunny.
Sunny?
Yes.
All right, Sunny.
My name is Bu Yi, and you also can call me Nikki.
What's your English name?
Nikki.
Nikki?
Yeah.
Sunny Nikki.
Oh, okay.
The name's Kyuhyun. I'm from Korea. Well, yeah.
Your
but-
your name is G Dog.
And he calls me G-Dog because he can't pronounce it.
Yeah. All right. No, I just recognize that I can't pronounce it. So listen, here, you can move down a little bit. So I want to do something here, because the title of today's class is Punishment. We're playing off of, we're kind of going off of the last class. Now, several weeks ago, one of our TAs went in the back, and told someone who was sitting against the wall. And by the way, if there's anyone sitting against the wall, you can't be sitting against the wall on the floor, okay? And our TA said, hey, you can't sit there. You have to take a seat. And said it again, and said it a third time. And the student told the TA to fuck off. All right? Now, as best that my student can assess G-Dog, they thought this student was Chinese. It's possible they were Korean, but I doubt a Korean in this room would tell my TA to fuck off. Because Koreans, I just don't think, I have a feeling they were Chinese. But they could have been Korean. Therefore, that's why you're up here. All right? So, you understand fuck off? Okay. How would you say fuck off in Mandarin? Wait, hang on. Can you say that without, like, if your grandparents were watching, would they think this was really, you should never have said it, or is it okay?
Well, I won't say it in front of my grandparents, but I might say it in front of my parents.
Okay, okay, all right, that's good. So how do you say fuck off in Mandarin?
Well, to be gentle, you can just say 滚开, or
Wait, how do you say it?
滚开.
滚开.
Yes.
How'd I do? If I said
滚开.
滚开?
Yeah.
Okay. If you weren't being gentle, what would you say? You wanted to give it the full, like, fuck off.
Well, 去你妈的 will be fine.
What is it?
去你妈的.
Whoa. Mandarin speaker. Is that pretty bad?
Yes.
So now I want the two of you to take yourselves to China. And you're in a classroom. And a TA comes over to you and tells you to do something, and you don't do it, and the TA tells you to do it again. And you say it again?
滚开.
Yeah, say the other one.
去你妈的.
Chunimado? What would happen? First off, could you ever imagine saying that in China?
No.
Like, I mean, imagine there were 5 million different universes. Okay? Could you imagine in one of those universes that somebody would say that to the professor's TA in China?
No.
No, go use the mic.
No.
Why not?
Like, I think in China, like the teachers and TAs are quite need to be respected. Like we've been taught this since we're kids, and we need to obey everything they said, and you cannot violate anything.
And especially like me, right? Because I'm practically elderly. So, because with my age, that brings with it a lot of status in China. Yeah. So you, and the TA represents me, so like you would never do that, ever. Why do you think somebody would do that here? Besides the fact that they lost their damn mind. Wait, was it one of you?
No.
It wasn't.
I would know.
Yeah. Why do you think someone would do that? Like they would never do it in China, but do it here.
I think if they did that here, maybe they will do that in China as well.
You think so?
Because yes, I think it's because of the human personality, not because of not because we're from China. It's just because he or she, as the human being, they would like to say the bad words to the TA or professors. They're just not polite at all.
Yeah. Yeah? So they would say that? But you just said they wouldn't say that to professor.
Me personally,
You.
I won't say that.
Yeah? But can you imagine other people saying that? Be careful, because you got 1.3 billion people assessing what you say. I mean, because you're saying there's like a sense of respect and...
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Are you shocked that someone would say it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Bro, in Korea, nobody would... Do you have a thought on that? Well, you weren't in school in Korea.
I was until I
Alright,
was a kid, but
Wait, hang on, though. Could you imagine anyone ever saying that to a professor in Korea? No? Hang on. Wait, hang on. Can you get her face? Zoom in on her face. Can you put yellow on the screen? I want you to do the exact face that you just did. Hey, all right, wait. Okay, no, hang on. Get a close-up over. Okay, I'm going to ask you again. Can you imagine a student in Korea telling the TA, the assistant of the professor, to fuck off? Yeah, all right, okay. Yeah, I can't imagine it either. And I mean, it would never happen, right? Dude, so it would never happen. How do you say fuck off in Korean?
씨발 꺼져라.
Yeah, that came out really easily, by the way. You said that as though you said it many times. How do you say it?
씨발 꺼져라.
Shiba
꺼져라.
Kotara. How do I do? Shiba Kotara.
There's a bit of a G in the middle.
Shiba
꺼져라.
Kochara.
Yeah.
Ooh. All right. I'm not going to remember that. All right. Yeah, you can't imagine that in Korea either, right?
In Korea, probably not. I have heard cases that there are, but definitely not predominant.
Uh-huh. It's not common here either, right?
I don't honestly like in public school. There
Yeah,
are
yeah,
some uproars, but there's not as much
Yeah.
as you might expect.
Yeah. No, for me, it's kind of interesting, right? And I'm just curious about when you say the word in someone else's, like for me, I swear in Spanish a lot, but the words don't mean anything to me because they're just words. I didn't grow up with them. They're not attached in some way. So I get what Shiba Gotaro. Gochura.
Yeah.
Shiba Gochura.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't mean, it's just sounds. They're just vocalizations. It doesn't really mean anything. And when I swear in Spanish, it doesn't mean anything. But it means things to other people, so then I'm really careful about what I say. But sometimes I can say swear words without being careful enough. Yeah. Yeah, you also, I'm sure you learned them. Okay, that's it. I just wanted to find out what you thought of that. That's it. We're done. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dude, thank you, sir. Yeah.
Oh, I said what's on mine.
Thank you. Okay, bro, come on.
All of them?
Yeah, all. Okay, we're going to talk.
Because we only have 3.
Yeah, you guys got to share one of the mics. Do you guys want to sit on? Can you all fit on the table? It's good if you can. We're good? Nah, it's good. Let's do that. All right, so I want to go back to Irvin. You guys were all here last week for Irvin?
I wasn't.
Oh, fuck, dude.
My bad.
Oh, wait. Sorry about that. Wait, you watched it? Okay, good. Did you watch it?
No. I was there.
You were here. You weren't here? Did you watch it? Okay. Then I'm gonna play off the two of you for right now, and then we're gonna go. So Irvin is a friend who was incarcerated, a colleague, a friend.
Oh, I was there.
Oh, you watched that one. Who was incarcerated for 52 years? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you watched it. Okay, so you're good. All right. 52 years. Okay? And he got out. And first off, just a real quick question. What was notable about his story? Like, what jumped out to you?
I guess like there's sort of like I feel like a bit of like hopelessness in a way, because like he was just in there for like so long, and then the way he talks about it, it's sort of just like, oh well, it is what it is in a way, because you can't take that time back. So I noticed that a lot. Like he was very like humble.
Very
like,
humble.
sort of.
Someone else. Adam. Oh, wait, you guys didn't introduce yourself. Go ahead. We'll introduce you at the end. Whatever.
All right. I would probably say that I felt the opposite. After like throughout the talk, seeing like someone who's incarcerated for so long come like spending the rest of his life trying to like raise awareness about like the conditions in prison and like why you shouldn't go to prison. It gave me some hope that people like this exist, even if they've been treated and had to grow up in the worst conditions possible. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd agree with him because the way he talked about his prison life, it seemed like he wasn't regretful, like he wasn't in despair while he was in prison, but rather like it was a stepping stone into the person he is today. Yeah.
What did you make of the reason for that? By the way, hold the mic just like that. Yeah.
Gotcha.
What was your sense of why that was?
The way he talked about his prison life wasn't in a way of like regret or any remorse, but rather like it was like part of his life. Like he also said that when he went out of prison, he said that he's gonna convey the message everyone in prison wanted him to convey. So it feels like if anything, his life in prison is the reason why he's so wise today.
Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't very wise when he went into prison. Nicholas, do you have any? What stood out for you?
I mean, he just seemed pretty accepting with the outcome, and but they already said he was humble with himself, and he just went on with his life after.
Is there anything when you listen to him? Is there anything that you worry about, or anybody that you think about and worry about, really, or concerned about? You listen to him, like, I mean, that's a really open question, but I'm just wondering if there's anything there.
I guess like just like the despair part of it, like he just went to jail as a kid for like he didn't really know how to defend himself, like, or like what to do like when he got out and stuff like that. So like there's a lot of like despair, I feel like, and maybe if he wasn't the type of person that he was, it wouldn't have gone as well.
Yeah, for sure. What?
I would say, the early part of what he was talking about, like his childhood, I would say that's a part that really stuck with me personally, because you can't really blame him for trying to take the opportunities that he was given. You know, in growing up in like less than good conditions for some people, when they're given certain opportunities, whether it's crime or something, if it's the only route that they see, then it makes sense that they would go that way.
All right, let me tilt your prism a little bit. He came from a very stable family. They were lower middle class, but his father, his mother, they worked. I mean, people around him worked. Irvin was drawn to the dark side. Man. He was drawn to the streets and the flash, the this, the that. From a young age, thought he knew everything, and he just went out and. I mean, he grew up in what now is North Philly. Now it's a very poor area, but at the time, you know, it was this is part of the black working class that he just went a way that he didn't need to go. So, okay, how about that?
Yeah, in that case, you know, I'd amend my statement saying specifically these circumstances surrounding him growing up.
Yeah.
Like if he was in a good neighborhood, lower middle class, then maybe the kind of schools he went to, the teachers, the friends, the people who were in his environment, aside from at home. And, you know, he seems like a very wise person. He seems like a great person. He is. And you can't help but think, like, maybe if things were different, if he grew up somewhere else, different friends, different people, he might be like one of the major leaders in the world today.
Well, listen, so what I find is kind of interesting is a lot of us don't take opportunities that are available to us, right? So you get this guy here. Now think about this, right, bro? Look, you got a guy, first off, you got a guy who is incarcerated for 52 years. He can't even. I'm 63, right? So it's 52 of my 63 years. You can't even hold that in your mind. 52 years. He's sitting up here, and pretty quickly you can assess that he's got a lot of wisdom, right? When I was kind of watching the class and kind of noting what people were doing, and not like now. Look at how many heads are down right now because they're on their phones. Like, I don't know what people are doing on their phones, right? But they're doing something on their phones, and it's just the five of us, five knuckleheads up here talking. So it's like, all right, whatever, you five knuckleheads, maybe you don't really have anything to say. But dude, Irvin, 52 years. You walk into this room and this guy says he's been in prison 52 years. And it's pretty clear that he's got some wisdom in him. And like what I would expect any human being to say if they're, I don't know, sitting right here, I'm going to be saying like, oh shit, yo, put my phone away. I'm like this. I'm on the edge of my seat. I'm just watching. Like, okay, speak, Mr. Irvin, right? Speak, Mr. Moore. What are you doing? What do you have to tell me? Tell me truth. Tell me something. Tell me of your experience. But people didn't take advantage of that. And I think, wow, like what? Wow. Damn. It's just one of those things, right? So Irvin had opportunities too, and he didn't take advantage of them. And the thing is, when you're not listening to Irvin here, and you're like off in your, I don't know what you're doing on your phone, like what are you doing on your phone? Instead of listening to a man who has wisdom, who's been in prison for 52 fucking years. 52. And you're not paying attention. It's like, yeah, for me, there's no hope, you know. And maybe it's just a moment. You think like, all right, you lost it. But that's the kind of thing that will drive me out of teaching. It's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't, because it fills me with hopelessness. So anyway, do you have a thought on that?
I think it just portrays how like many of us are presented with opportunities that are very important to us, but we just miss them. Like the guy has so much wisdom in him. The way he talked, the way he articulated his thoughts was just like, wow. But I don't think many of us utilize that and actually pounce on that opportunity to actually talk with him and learn more.
Well, it's like if you meet the Buddha, you know, like people say, oh, like Christians have this idea that Jesus is going to come again. Y'all don't, you don't really have that in the same way, but Christians do, right? And like, but most Christians will never recognize Jesus because he'd come, he'd be speaking his wisdom, and he'd be busy, I don't know what y'all would be busy doing, but shopping on Amazon or something. I don't know. Here's Jesus standing there. He returned, and you won't even know it. So I don't know. Okay. Anyway, let's go a different direction. Hey, dude, that was funny, by the way. Okay. Rehabilitation versus punishment. What do you see when you think rehabilitation versus punishment? What does that mean to you? Nicholas, how about you, man?
Rehabilitation is meant to become a better person. Punishment is something that's given for doing wrong. So, I mean, but then again, there's good punishment. Like, I can punish myself by exercising, I guess you could say.
Uh-huh.
But then there's punishment for doing a petty crime or doing something terrible.
So, okay, somebody else. What's that mean for you?
Like when I think rehabilitation, I just imagine like, you know, those jails in like Norway, like on social media or something.
Yeah.
Like, like someone does something, they go in, then, you know, I guess they chill for a bit, then they leave. Then when I think punishment, I think more, oh yeah, you're just going to like some cell, you know.
Just locked away?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so Adam, you had a response to that. Like where do you land? Like where do you land? What do you?
Personally, I lean more towards rehabilitation, but when I look at it subjectively overall, it's very gray in my opinion. Who should be getting rehabilitated and who should be punished.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say you have someone like Irvin, right, who, you know, truly regretted what he did in his past.
Mm-hmm.
Someone like that really deserves to be rehabilitated and reintroduced to society. Whereas someone who's, let's say, like a mass murderer, absolutely no remorse in his mind.
Okay.
In my opinion, you know, if there's no chance at changing it, if they really truly want to stay on that path, then they should be punished for their actions.
And punish would be what?
Someone like that, I would say death, but it depends on a case-to-case basis, I guess.
Uh-huh. Wait, so let me just say, so where you're from, like what your background is.
I was born in Philly, but at the age of 6, I moved to Malaysia, spent my entire childhood there up until this year when I transferred to Penn State.
Mm-hmm. So are both your parents Malays?
My entire family is Malaysian. They just had me while they were studying here.
Got you. Okay, got you. So culturally speaking, you are Malaysian. And bro, and Adam, right? Okay. Take where you're from, because now we're going to talk about your countries.
I'm from Saudi Arabia, and my reply to that is that I don't think any type of punishment in this world is truly just. So, like, rehabilitation is always the better option, but not like every single time, because you may have like someone who tortured your family for 10 years. Does he truly deserve to be rehabilitated or punished?
Well, that would be the case with every crime, right? Somebody is going to be the victim of the crime at some level. But listen, so I'm going to come back to you. I want you to talk about Saudi Arabia in a second. Tanaka.
Tanaka.
Uh-huh.
I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm an international student.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm from a pretty podunk area, 2 hours north, but I am a dual citizen of Norway.
Mm-hmm.
So
So you're
I have
half.
some, yeah, I have ties over there. I go there a lot.
You go there a lot?
Yeah, I have a lot of family over there.
Okay, perfect. So let me just show. I want to show you some photos and slides, and then we're going to dig into this conversation from your cultural perspective. Okay. Hey, so here's this. This is actually a photo of a prison cell in Norway, right? So, bro, I did this for you, right? And if you kind of look at that, the recidivism rate in Norway, on average across crimes, is 16% of prisoners return to prison within 5 years. Look at that. That's better than your dorm room, man. Damn. Look at that. That's pretty sweet. It looks like it's IKEA. It looks like it's IKEA furniture kind of thing. Go to the next one. This is in Sweden. This is the most secure prison in Sweden. A prison cell. Okay. That's pretty sweet. Look at all the books, right? Okay, next one. Recidivism rate in the U.S., the likelihood of returning to prison, 70% of all, on average, prisoners who are in prison, incarcerated in prison, return within 5 years, okay, in the U.S. So that's a cell in the U.S. That's kind of a solitary cell, okay? Pretty intense. Next one. There's another cell. That's Thompson Penitentiary in Illinois. That's it. 2 prisoners in there, man. See, like the toilet? This is what Irvin would say, that he's used to living in a bathroom and, with 2 people. And some of the dudes, because there's not a lot to do except work out in prison. So when I go to prison, when I've been in prison with lots of prisoners, I mean, being in there, with people in like a big room full of lots of prisoners for banquets and different things. Like, dudes are big, man. You know what I mean? So put 2 really big dudes in there. So remember, Irvin said, if I spread my arms out, I can just touch both walls, right? Go to the next one. Here's like a cell block in the U.S. It's just, it is what it is. And one more. There's another cell block. You can assume in Scandinavia, in Norway and Sweden and so on, that's not what cell blocks are looking like, right? And then I want to show you a couple other things. Go to another slide. In El Salvador, so El Salvador is dealing with a gang problem, like a really serious gang problem, because all these gangbangers from like MS-13 and 18 and so on have returned to El Salvador, and they just really took things over. And so they built this mega prison, and this President Bukele, who's Arab, by the way, in ancestry, built these mega prisons. And this is count. Like, this is it. These guys are basically naked. And all the tattoos are gang identifiers and so on. Although lots of people who are not in gangs have gotten swept up in this, but they imprison like 66,000 people. Go to the next one. Look at that. There's like a count. These guys are all basically, they have shorts on and that's it, man. That's pretty intense. Like, that's really intense. Thinking about Norway and Sweden, that's not happening there. I mean, people are wearing their street clothes. People are. And then I think is there one more slide? No? Okay. So here's my question, right? How would you define the system of justice in your country? Okay, can I start with you? I have the idea that most people think that in Saudi Arabia, you guys are really, really harsh with prisoners. Yeah, can you talk about that?
Firstly, I am not as informed as I'd like to be in this topic. However, many people have the stereotype of like Saudi Arabia cutting off hands, pushing people off buildings whenever they commit a crime. No, like that's not Saudi Arabia. And however, like it is part of some like countries that do not represent like Muslims, but rather like some extremists and whatever.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Like the photo that I showed from
in
Iraq
Gaza.
with
In Gaza,
Basim. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like I'd say our justice system in Saudi Arabia is like it's pretty normal. But if anything, since it's an Islamic country, the crime rates are very low. So like you don't even see crimes in the first place. For example, like if you were to put your phone in an elevator for like 3 hours straight, it would still be there.
Yeah.
That's how safe it is in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, like anywhere, really. Not quite anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, who's going to take your phone?
No one.
No, but hang
What do you
on.
mean?
But then you could leave it anywhere.
Yeah. Like if I left it at somewhere at a
Like
mall.
on a park bench.
Sure.
Which I've done. Like I've been, not in Saudi, but, you know, when I'm in the UAE or Kuwait or Qatar or, leaving things, computers and phones and things places.
Yeah, because like in my point of view, since it's an Islamic country, like many people have their values there and everything, and like they're not gonna steal your phone because they don't want to commit something that's haram.
That's haram. Dude. You know what that means, right? Do you know what that means? Haram? Haram. Yeah. You know. Sinful. Dude, but why? I want to go further though, right? It's haram in lots of places. In Christian society, it's sinful to break laws and steal people's phones, and people still do it. So can you say a little bit more about that? Like how much of it is religious and how much of it is cultural and how much of it is people afraid of the government? And you're speaking on behalf of Saudis, so I know that you can only say what you are able to say. You're not a scholar of your nation.
Like I said, I'm not as informed as I'd like to be. However, I can say that, let's say in America, for example, most people who claim they are Christians, they don't practice Christianity as much as like other people that are in, let's say, Romania or somewhere else. So like my point is not that Christians are not pious or they're not gonna steal. My point is that most people who proclaim that they're Christians won't even practice Christianity as much as other people in other countries. That's why crime rates in America are so high, even though it's like a Christian country.
Yeah.
But for example, in Saudi Arabia, you see many people practice Islam, and if anything, they're practicing it correctly for the most part. And like if you would take Romania, which is mostly a Christian country, you would see that the crime rates, at least for that, is less. That's why, like I'm saying, it's not that Christians are bad. It's rather that people say that they're Christians.
So it's people link what you see, right? Your observation is that and we could say in the Khaliji countries, right? Because it's not different for Oman and Kuwait and the Emirates and so on, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing.
So you would say that people link their religious values and ethics with their behavior when it comes to things like stealing and that sort of thing. You would say that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And here, it's like we hold these, look, it's part of the 10 Commandments, right? Thou shalt not steal. Isn't that a 10 Commandment? Christians, that's a commandment, right? Thou shalt not steal. But whatever, we steal all the time. Not that people don't steal. But are people also, how much are people doing it? What's your sense, right? Do you not commit unethical actions or criminal actions because you feel like that would be really bad for you as a Muslim versus I don't want to get caught up and get in trouble? I don't know.
I feel like with religion, the more pious you are, the more principles you're going to gain. And if you're avoiding something because it's part of the law, you're more likely to do it because if anything, it's not part of your principles, but rather you're just following Allah, right? But for example, for me as a Muslim, like I'm fasting today. and not because it's Ramadan or anything. Ramadan has ended. However, I am fasting to like avoid some temptations, and if anything, I want to avoid sin as much as possible. So I want to lesser my chance of sinning. So
Awesome,
it's
man.
part of my principle rather than it being a law.
So when you're taking the exam on Thursday, and the person next to you is taking it, and you can see their computer, would you like pull your hat down so you don't want to avoid the sin of stealing the answers from that person?
Inshallah, I will.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Dude. Hang on.
There we go.
Dude, do you know what that means, bro? Inshallah?
God willing.
It means God willing. Notice he didn't say no. He didn't say, no, I'm not, there's no way I'm going to look at the answers to the Social 19 quiz, because that would be sinning. He said, inshallah, I won't do that.
God wills it, then
Yeah.
it's God's will.
Oh, dude, oh my God. Muslims, you're all good. If Allah wills that the person next to you has all the answers for the Social 18 exam 3, just go ahead and cheat, man. It's all good. Bro, how about...
That was a joke for future purposes.
I get it. That's a joke. Yeah, it's a joke. Yeah. Dude, Adam, how about in Malaysia? Like when you think about the rehabilitation versus punishment, what's your sense of how the system is there?
One word comes to mind immediately: corrupt. Absolutely. In Malaysia, in fact, I actually did a search about this, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago, because I was curious myself. I think in Malaysia, overall, like 78% of the crimes are just corruption.
Just corruption.
In almost every area of anything in Malaysia, down to like just your neighborhood, like watch or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you say corruption, what do you mean?
Usually, what I mean by that is that a lot of people who are involved in, whether it's the government or the justice system, any possible form of organization in Malaysia, many of the people, many of them kind of prioritize their own individual needs first.
Mm-hmm. But and this is a Muslim country.
Yes, it is. I'm a Muslim.
Dude, you Saudis need to go to Malaysia and like hook them up on like what the Quran is all about.
Yeah.
And what Muhammad, peace be upon him, was actually saying. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah. Interesting thing about that, actually. I have a personal take regarding this, and it's that most people know Islam, the two different sects of it,
Yeah.
the Sunni and Shia. Me personally, especially when I go to other Muslim countries, comparing it to how I grew up in Malaysia as a Muslim as well, I feel like it's more than just the two of those. It's kind of different depending on where you go.
Yeah, different on the country.
Yes.
Very much. Yeah, the culture. Hey, go to punishment. When people talk about crime in Malaysia, talk about like corruption and people who are corrupt and so on, are people leaning toward punishment or rehabilitation?
I'd say right now more towards punishment, because Malaysia is a fairly recent country in the grand scheme of the world. You know, I think we're only like almost 70 years old since independence. And most of the people in Malaysia at the moment, like my parents' generation and the one above that, have very close-minded views regarding a lot of different things, from, crime all the way to mental illnesses.
Okay.
So at the moment, I would say, if you go to prison or if you have to go to court or anything like that, 9 times out of 10, you're going to get punished. It's unlikely that you'll be going through any kind of rehabilitation like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so for you, what does rehabilitation mean for you? Like, what would that mean?
For me, it means putting someone on what is arguably, at least societally speaking, the right path. If, regardless of what you did, what crimes you committed, by law or just in a societal sense, being rehabilitated means trying to change your mind and soul towards seeing things at a acceptable level, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Would you agree with that? We're going to get down to the two of you in a second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it seems to me that, like what Irving was saying, and if we look at the numbers in the U.S., 70% of all incarcerated prisoners who are released are going to return to prison at some level. So if you want the goal of what we're trying to do here in the world is, in any society, is to get people to live according to the rules and the mores of that society, right? That makes for a good society. If everybody drives on the right side of the road and picks up their litter and pays their taxes and does the things that we want them to do, we can expand the degree to which people's needs can be met, and we live in a good world. It's all good, right? We trust each other, we work together. I can actually leave my phone on the subway, and I'm pretty reasonably certain that I'm going to get it back. Someone's going to get it back to me, okay? So if that's the case, then it would make sense that our justice system is oriented toward keeping people on the straight path, right? The straight path. That's a Muslim thing, right? The straight path, right? Isn't it? Don't you call it the straight path? Like the path to Allah?
I don't think we call it that, but like there are
Where did
some
I get
other
that?
things we say about the straight path.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right. In any case, keep people on the path. And if they waver off the path, get them back on the path. So what Irving was saying is, look, if you just punish, these people are going to get out. And then what you've done is you've created people who are going to be angry, first off. And secondly, they're not going to be more educated. They're not going to be more civil, just better humans to make life a better place. So that's the punishment side. And you would say, Adam, like, yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's slowly, especially with my generation of Malaysians, it's slowly changing. It's kind of like we're having our own little Malaysian spring. Yeah, my generation, we're much more open-minded compared to our predecessors, and I think it will change. Like, rehabilitation will be more of a big thing 20, 30 years from now, but as it stands, it's definitely like punishment leaning.
Yeah. Okay. Tanaka, how about in Zimbabwe? Like, what's when you think about the way people talk about crime and punishment and so on, what's the general sort of idea among people that you know?
Actually, when I was hearing Adam talk about Malaysia, I was like, yeah, it's very similar in a lot of ways. So like when people talk about crime, it's mostly that they're worried about like corruption and stuff, like government corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think it's kind of because I don't think there's really the same sort of idea as like civil society, you know?
Yeah.
Like when someone like commits a crime or something, you don't think, oh, I'm undermining my fellow countrymen. There isn't really that idea. It's more just like, it's not like individualistic, but it's more like family based.
Okay.
So like people think about like, oh, their own families, or like let's say if someone's like brother like did drugs or something, then like it would be considered, oh, the mechanism for resolving this is like within the family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then if like somebody else commits a crime, that's considered like, oh, somebody else's business unless it affects like your family and stuff.
So the state in Zimbabwe is pretty weak, relatively speaking, right? The bureaucratic state is pretty weak.
Yeah, I'd say there isn't really a strong bureaucratic state.
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah.
it's like ineffective, so people like to work around it rather
Yeah.
than work through it.
And you can, right? I mean, you have to, like you said, communities and families and so on. So when you think about punishment versus rehabilitation in a society, in a culture like that, you're naturally going to gravitate more toward rehabilitation because that's what we do in families. You can just keep it on. It's all good.
Yeah, I'd say so. Like Well, it's like mixed. So like if someone like gets caught for like a crime from the government would like punish them harshly, like toss them into jail.
Mm-hmm.
But there might be like, say, like the villagers that live around the jail, like they always start up stuff like there's like church choirs and stuff
Yeah.
with like prisoners. There's like lots of institutions like that.
Uh-huh.
So like, yeah, so like at the government level it's punishment, then at an individual level it's like redemption.
So that's that redemption, rehabilitation.
So it's
yeah.
like mixed.
Yeah. Hey. All right, man. Just want to remind you that we're listening to ourselves up here. All right. So, you know, it reminds me of this idea that if my child is a drug addict, let's say, right? My child's on drugs, whatever. My child has an addiction. But, you know, if it's your child or the child of those people over there, then the child's I'm more likely to see them as a criminal. You know, so what you're saying is you've got this culture in Zimbabwe of where families and communities are strong, and they're going to be much more likely to step in and take care of the problems in those communities.
Yeah, exactly. Like let's say like my cousin or like my friend, like they got caught like I don't know, with some drugs, then like a relative or something, they might say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you did that." You know, maybe like, you know, your aunt will like beat you or stuff. You'll have like people saying, "No, you can't do this."
Uh-huh.
So there's a lot of like, I guess there's like a redemption support structure, like in terms of families. But if it's like some other kid, they'll just say, "Oh, just don't hang around that kid."
Right.
Just, like, just
Right.
avoid
Got
that
you.
kid.
Right, as
So it's
opposed to hang around that kid
Yeah.
and see if you can see if you can help redeem
No,
him.
it's only a
or her.
problem if it's like within like our group.
Yeah,
And if
yeah,
it's
got
if it's
that.
outside, we'll just work around it.
So, but there's something really powerful about that, though. Right? This is it's similar to Saudi Arabia. You just have a much stronger bureaucratic state than Zimbabwe. Yeah. Huh. Hey, by the way, Tanaka, how many people? You're here as an international student. How many people, when you say you're from Zimbabwe, how many people know where that is? What's it like your kind of best guess?
Oh, I usually never just say I'm from Zimbabwe. I just say I'm from Africa, and if they want to know, like I'll explain. But you know.
Yeah.
Or if it's just passing in conversation, maybe I'll say I'm from South Africa because I also grew up in South Africa, and I feel like people know where that is because the location's in the name.
They
so.
know, right?
Yeah.
They know it's in the southern part of
Yeah.
Africa. Huh. Hey, okay, cool. Nicholas, so just speaking from your Norwegian side, what stands out when you think about rehabilitation and punishment, like holding them up against one another?
Well, Norway is definitely a rehabilitation country, in case you can tell by how they treat their prisoners.
By
I don't
the
even
photos that I showed.
Yeah, I don't even think they are prisoners. I think they're just going on a field trip, it looks like and chilling in a hotel room.
What's your gut? What's your, to the best of you can know, what's your family say about that? Like, does it just feel like it's just a Norwegian thing? It's like, yeah, of course, that's how we do it.
It's really just a Scandinavian thing.
Yeah, Scandinavian,
Yeah,
for
it's small population, not much diversity, really. They just are kind of all close-knitted, and like I read the what was it? The last exam. You said that it was the Denmark. People in Denmark are very quiet and
Yeah.
weird. Norwegians are very shy and weird too,
Uh-huh.
and they just kind of keep to themselves.
Mhm.
And I guess it works.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, like what's your gut about that? Like when you think about it, like what stands out when you think about that? Like prison cells that look like you're nicer than your dorm rooms. What's your American side think about that?
In comparison,
Yeah.
it's kind of sad. It's so sad to see how the prison system works here, and seeing that stat, it really puts it into light. Because, I mean, how many people are incarcerated in America? I feel like it's quadruple times the population of Norway. Like
Well,
it's
a couple million.
that are, so it's about a third of the population of Norway. Then
Yeah.
it's
Well, besides, by the way, besides the U.S., I think it's U.S. and South Africa lead the world in incarcerated people
Yeah.
per capita.
I don't have many feelings. It's just bad.
So when you think about it's just bad, but Americans would say, yeah, but you got to punish people. Like if you don't punish them, then what? Then they're not going to learn, right? You just go to a hotel for.
So then it comes down to the argument, like, should you spank your child to see them as a better person and see how they're raised, or should you, teach them how to do right instead of hitting them? I don't really know. I really think everyone deserves a chance, even if they fuck up. Like, they deserve to find themselves.
Hey, so what? Okay, so listen. So I'm curious about something. One of the things that I think there are a lot of people who are my age who watch the stream, right? And one of the reasons they watch the stream is because they're just really curious about what you all, like younger folks like you all, think about the world. And the reason I do the class like this, because I'm also really curious. You know, I mean, here's this Adam guy from Malaysia, and Tanaka from Zimbabwe and South Africa, and Salman from Saudi Arabia. And bro, Nicholas from both Norway and then the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, right? And so I guess I'm just curious about how do you, I'm just ask the three of you, what stands out about the U.S. and our insistence on punishment and just this kind of way that we have about ourselves? Like, what do you see that maybe we don't see?
One of the things that stand out for me, is the way you guys, the guys in the U.S. think that punishment is the only solution. Because sometimes, this is an extreme example. Let's say you got this criminal who tortured a family, right? And you put him in prison. Then he has solitude. Is that really a punishment, or is it some act of mercy for him? He has solitude to think about himself and everything. So there needs to be some type of level of balance where you punish them to a certain extent, but also at the same time you need to find a way to rehabilitate them so they don't go back in prison.
So where did you learn that? Where did you pick that up along the way? Think about growing up and where'd you come up with that?
I really like to read books sometimes, and I remember I read about the philosopher Socrates, and I remember his story when he was in prison. He got the chance to escape from prison, but he chose not to. And if anything, prison wasn't an obstacle for him. He was just chilling there and meditating. So it was a chance for him to gain some solitude. So my point is, prison, it shouldn't be a place of punishment, because punishment isn't always supposed to be just, but rather you should try to find a way to better the person, because you can't always gain revenge. Even if you're the family of the victim, you will never find some sense of resolve.
So that goes. This goes to Bassem, and Bassem saying, Bassem says, look, I can hate the people who killed my family, but that doesn't bring my family back. All it does is put hatred in my soul and in my heart, and then I walk around with that hatred.
To those people, I say, don't forget, but just let go. Sometimes you need to let go.
Yeah. Hey, Adam, how about you, man? What do you see that growing up in Malaysia that just strike around some of these issues, but it could even be another issue that just strikes you as Do you see how you're really different now that you're here in the U.S., back here in the U.S.?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nothing is perfect. Everywhere has their own issues, their own complexities. Malaysia has their problems, America has theirs. You can't really compare one justice system with another like that because you don't understand the societal norms, how the people work if you're not one of them. But I will say that I do find it interesting that in Malaysia, we have our own controversial race-based issues because in Malaysia, if anyone doesn't know, there are three main races.
Hang on. Nobody knows.
Okay, yeah.
Except maybe you and me and a couple other people.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine most of them don't know where Malaysia is, but we're above Singapore if you're curious.
It's between Zimbabwe and South Africa. I'm just kidding. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, so in Malaysia, we have three main races. Malays, such as myself, Chinese, and Indians. Our race-based issues are there in many different areas, but I do find it interesting that one of the areas where it's not very prominent is in our justice system, funny enough. If you had me put it in an order, I'd say Malays are definitely the majority race in Malaysia. I mean, Malaysia, but Indians do get Malaysian Indians do get slightly worse treatment compared to the other two. However, it's not to like a crazy extent. Whereas, in America, like the justice system, the systemic racism within it, it's much more prominent,
It seems more prominent for you.
Yeah.
But right, okay. No, I'm saying it seems more prominent because unless you've really studied it extensively, but
I wouldn't say I'm that knowledgeable about it, but from what I've read and what I have studied, that's the way it seems to me.
Yep. Okay. So hang on. So there is. This is kind of interesting that it's like the group in power is always going to use it'd be advantaged by that power in some way, and the Malays, right, are going to have more power. I mean, that's just the nature of it. Do people talk about it? Do Malaysian Indians and Malaysian Chinese, do they talk about it?
Absolutely. I mean, because it's like you said just now, I think that, because I'm not, I didn't spend my whole life in America, so you corrected me just now saying, in my opinion, the systemic racism, right? In Malaysia, what is interesting is that by law, there are certain things that divide the races. And this isn't something that's, societal or just, how it ended up.
Yeah.
This is in the law itself.
Yeah, that's what makes Malaysia really interesting.
Yeah.
Not many countries have. It's yeah, go ahead.
So, like I said, there are three main races that would consider you as Malaysian. You'd get your citizenship, you get your ID, everything. But then there is something known as the Bumiputra system. Bumiputras are Malays, basically. And in law, there are certain things in Malaysia that only Bumiputras can do that Indians and Chinese Malaysians can't. One of those examples is that if you're a Bumiputra like myself, I can live in a certain land that is designated for only Bumiputras. But if I'm Chinese or Indian, Malaysian, even if I'm Malaysian, I can't live there.
Yeah.
It's it's messed up, and it's definitely something.
In Indian or Chinese areas.
Yeah,
too.
exactly.
Yeah.
We even have our own version of low income housing we call them B40, which is the lowest income group.
Yeah.
We have government housing that's designated for them, but there are some that are only allowed for Malays or Bumiputras, and we talk about it a lot. It's a pretty big issue.
It's
yeah.
legalized discrimination.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the Saudis, you got a lot of stuff that's reserved for Saudi citizens, and all the other workers, expats and workers. You have the European, the wealthier expats, but then you have all the workers coming from the Philippines and Nepal and all over, right? India, Pakistan.
Yeah, like for example, Saudis have multiple benefits that like some Pakistani people or like people from the Philippines don't have that come to Saudi. But like the people who come from there to Saudi, they only come for the sake of working to fund their families and everything.
Yeah.
Like I know multiple people from the Philippines, like females, they come to work as a maid in Saudi Arabia just to like fund their families just a bit.
But how about Malaysia? How many Malaysians go to Saudi, dude?
Quite a lot. We, for our pilgrimage and everything.
Yeah.
I will say though that you did say like if like someone from like the Philippines came to Saudi, they wouldn't get as much. To me, that makes more sense because they're not like they're from the Philippines at the end of the day.
Well, it's the same in the United States, right?
Yeah.
You can even if you have your residency card.
Yeah,
it's like not
exactly.
exactly. Dude, Hey, go ahead. Final statement.
Okay, yeah. The reason why it's such a hot topic in Malaysia is because Indian, Chinese, Malay, we're all Malaysians. We all grew up there, and we're all situated there, you know. And if you are, it's funny as well because technically Malays aren't indigenous people at Malaysia, like geographically.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous.
Which is fascinating. Hey, Tanaka, so what's interesting here, by the way, with Adam saying, like a lot of Americans have this idea, I will hear Americans say that the U.S. is the most racist country in the world, or there's more discrimination in the United States than anywhere else, and I always say, that's because you just haven't traveled to other places, so like, the arguments and the conversations going on in Adam's country are pretty intense. How about who's like the lowest on the totem pole, on the in the spectrum or whatever, the ladder?
Like
in Zimbabwe.
Like in Zimbabwe?
Yeah.
In
Clearly not you, bro, because you're here studying in the U.S.
Well, yeah, I guess I have the privilege to study in the United States. I would say Zimbabwe, not really, because most of the population is just like two races, and even those two races are like in different like parts of the country.
Yeah.
So there isn't really like as much of like a caste system, really. I guess there's like a very very small minority of white people, and they're relatively well off. But there's also a group of black people that are as well off. So there's not really as much. Yeah.
Have white people really been able to regroup some of the power?
I'd say not really. There's just not that many.
Yeah.
In South Africa, it's a bit different.
Yeah.
Because like they're a larger part of the population. Like South Africa is more racially divided, but Zimbabwe isn't really.
Hey, so I want to ask a final question. Nicholas, I want to ask the final question to you. What do you think is the most important lesson to learn from Irvin Moore?
From what?
To learn from Irvin Moore.
Irvin Moore?
Our guest. 52 years incarcerated Irvin Moore. What's the most important thing that you think to learn from him?
To forgive, even if you've been wronged. So wronged. Just always forgive and find love. Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So why do we hate when the same result happens from hate? Why don't we try loving? Why don't we try forgiving?
So, but he also committed a wrong. He took someone's life. It was an accident, but he still did it.
Did that family, I can't remember, did they ever talk to him again? But I don't know how they felt. I mean, obviously they probably hated him, and they probably still do if they're still around.
No, mostly
I don't know.
not, but yeah. So, okay, but hang on, let me go back. So the idea, though, is, I'm going to just rephrase this from you. So when people commit wrongs, we don't have to focus on the wrong. We can focus on the good that can come out of the wrong. Is what I hear.
Correct. Yeah. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Right. That's really what I heard from all of you. So what's really kind of interesting to me is that I randomly brought 4 of you up here, and like you're of a certain generation. I mean, you're like very around 20 years old, more or less, and you all have very similar ideas about right and wrong and moving on and building a good society and whatever that means. Huh, bro. Oh yeah. All right, man. Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks for being up here. Dude.